Good morning. Welcome to RV Fishing Chat. Another fine day in Texas. We actually had rain last night. It actually rained, like really rained. I'm happy. I'm really happy. It was, came home in the rain actually. Had to stay late at work, and it was really rainy. So, yep, it's good. I'm really happy about that because that fills my rivers back up so I can go fishing in the rivers. Or at least come springtime. But yeah, today I've got an interesting story. So I've taken to this hot idea of telling some of my fish stories, and I've got some interesting fish stories from my dad when he was in Africa, and he's got some other stories, a lot of different fish stories from the family. Apparently, my great grandfather had a couple of fish stories, a shark story that I'm gonna have to tell one of these days. But I got to get my dad to write it down so I can get all the stuff right. So one of these days that's coming. A pretty cool shark story from Corpus Christi. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, this story is about the big tuna. Actually, I'm going to call it the lady in the big tuna, because the highlight of the story would happen to have something to do with my wife. But this big tuna I'm referring to is the same big tuna, or very, very similar to the big tuna that my buddy Max's dad has. So I'm pretty sure Max has been out in that big tuna a few times. And it's the same kind of big tuna. So if you're watching this, Max, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's an awesome boat. But yeah, so our first trip in our big tuna was our first, I shouldn't say trip, because I think the last story I told about the South Atlanta River was our first trip, our first long trip. But we had gone fishing multiple times. So, but this was our first trip down to the coast, and we took it down to Goose Island, which has it's basically an island, and then there's a pier that goes on out past the island. And we had no issues. We popped it in the water, jumped in. We went around. We started kind of on the left side of the pier, and where there was a channel. Caught some trout out there one day, or on the same day. Caught some trout out there, and then finally that same day, it was actually when I caught my second red drum ever, and caught it off a little shell reef out there, so to speak. It wasn't really a reef, but yeah, and along the edge of a channel. So it's kind of cool. I thought that was, I was quite proud of myself for that. Caught my first second redfish. It wasn't a keeper, but it was a redfish. So went around the end of the pier, I think, or we crossed under it. I can't remember what we did. I think we went around the end of the pier, because there was underneath the pier, or where the pier went, it was a really long pier. There was another shell bank bar that was exposed during low tide. So we went and stood on that bar, and somewhere in there, about the time we got to the bar, Sarah started feeling sick, but she couldn't tell me. She was struggling with that and wasn't quite sure what was wrong, and said something about that she was tired, she was going to sit down. So she sat down and just sat for a while I fished. Well, while we were doing that, the wind picked up, and I tell you what, it didn't take much, and that channel between us, where we were on the bank, on the shell bar, the sandbar, and the shore was maybe 150 yards or 100 yards, and but that channel was deep enough to where it caused trouble. for us to get back. It was really choppy, and the waves were coming up over the front of the kayak, and of course Sarah's sitting up there, and she's just not feeling good by this point. She doesn't get seasick, at least I don't think she does, but she was just feeling awful, and I didn't know, except that, well, I knew she wasn't feeling good because she said we ought to get back. And I'm like, okay, that's not like her. Usually she stays out all day, so I wasn't too worried about it. But by the time we got to shore, she said she was just feeling awful, just sick. And I didn't know. She said everything to her was like she was in a daze, in a dream kind of like thing. And so anyway, we were getting towards shore, and I couldn't get it to go to the beach where like to the sandbar so we could step out, and we ended up going to where there was a cement wall with a railing and a little slip, where kind of a sort of a slip that you could stand on to get out, but it was cement, and of course it's had the waves crashing on it, and some of you who are familiar already know what I'm about to say. She's in Crocs, right? Always is. And she went to step out, and lo and behold, as we were getting up towards shore, we were having trouble getting the kayak to stay near the wall. It was really, really rough. The water was rough. So I decided to go ahead. I'm backing into my parking spot here, so bear with me for a moment. But yeah, so anyway, so as we got close to the wall, there was this guy who saw us struggling to try to get the kayak to stay near the wall, near the railing where we could, step out. And but the railing was just a little bit away from the edge, so it was a little hard. You had to step on the edge before you could grab the railing. Smart. And so here's Sarah. She stands up in the boat, which I was, she's always been good at that, and I'm not as good at it. So she stands up, goes to step out, and she's stepping out, like I said before, on a rock that had water washing on it for years. That rock was covered with moss and slime and algae and stuff. And she's getting ready to step out, and I'm like, don't step there, as I knew she was just gonna go boom and just land in the water. She was could land on the cement, and just as I was about to yell, this guy just reaches out like an angel of mercy and grabs her arm, and just woof, pulls her up on shore. And I was like, thank you. Yes, I was like, I was about to scream. Because she just kind of jumped up and was like, I'm going for the shore. I was like, no, wait. It was bad. I thought I was going to see her just crack her head open on that cement. I was nervous. I saw all kinds of things flash through my mind. I was just like, she's going to die. But, yeah, he grabbed her arm and just pulled her up on shore, and I was like, oh, thank you. And I got over there, and then, it was a piece of cake to get up. But I had real water shoes, so the slippery rock didn't bother me so much. But yeah, talk about exciting. I mean, that was our first trip out on the coast, and first time we'd taken the kayak out on a bay or anything like that. We weren't out in the Gulf. We were just in a bay. It was one of the bigger bays. It was Aransas Bay, which is probably I don't know, 20 miles long, something like that. 30 miles long. It was a pretty good sized bay. Might have been longer than that. It might be more like its widest point. It was really, really wide, so probably could have been 70 miles long or something, but it was only about maybe 30 miles wide too, so it's more of a triangle. So there was the top, we were near the top part of it, but the wind was blowing all the way across the lake into that little area where we were. So the waves were probably, I don't know, 2.5 feet high maybe. So they were pretty good sized waves, and it was keeping us busy. I was nervous about that because we were not used to waves. We had not been on waves at all until we got out there. So yeah, that freaked us out a little bit. But yeah, so that's my story of taking the big tuna to the coast. It was quite the thing, and we haven't had an opportunity. No, we may have gone back once since then, and we kind of learned our lesson. We know where to go now, but yeah, so that was, pay attention when you're out there on the water. That's what you got to do, because you never know when that wind may come up. We've got another story that we're going to do a video on before too long of us on Lake Bastrop where the water was choppy like that. Worse than anything, I don't think, it may have been worse than anything we've ever seen. Possibly. So there was only one other time when I was in a tournament where the water was worse. So we're about the same. But anyway, that's it. That's my fish story for today. Hope you enjoy. And see if I can tell you some more fish stories in the near future. Safe travels and tight lines, folks.